Imagine having everything you ever dreamed of. Money, power, recognition, the world at your feet. And yet, feeling a deep emptiness inside, as if something essential was missing. Now imagine this man surrounded by all his wealth, crossing paths with someone who seemingly has nothing. A homeless artist, living on the streets, armed with nothing more than a makeshift canvas and a single brush. But this man without material possessions, carries within him something far more valuable. A unique vision, a perspective on life that even the billionaire cannot grasp. And it is precisely this encounter, this unexpected connection, that changes everything. The billionaire, trapped in his world of numbers and status, never imagined that a simple painting could reach something so profound within his heart. Yet there, in front of an artwork born on the sidewalks of the city, he discovers something he wasn't even looking for, the very essence of life. What is it that he sees in that canvas? What could be more powerful than all the fortune he has amassed over the years? What happens when a man who owns everything, but feels hollow inside, meets someone who, with nothing, holds the power to transform him? This is not a common story of success and failure, but rather a tale about the discovery of freedom, of true wealth, and of what really matters. How can art, without pretense, without rules, go beyond simply decorating a space? How can it touch, heal, and change not only a person, but the entire course of their life? Get ready to discover how a homeless artist painted the heart of a billionaire, showing him that, in the end, what matters most is not what you own, but what you are capable of giving to the world. The day was gray and cold, typical of a winter afternoon in the big city. The billionaire, dressed in an expensive suit, hurried through the busy streets, paying little attention to what surrounded him. He often felt somewhat isolated, wrapped in his own fortune, yet with nothing real to fill the emptiness within. As he crossed the square, something caught his eye. A man was crouched down, painting with remarkable skill on a torn piece of cardboard. The homeless artist was completely absorbed in his work. The vibrant colors of his painting stood in sharp contrast to the gray of the streets. The billionaire stopped instinctively, watching the man create something so beautiful amid the chaos. He drew closer, unsure of what was drawing him in, the simplicity of the artist or the intensity with which he worked. Something in that moment stirred the billionaire's heart, awakening an unfamiliar curiosity. "What are you painting?" asked the billionaire, breaking the silence. The artist lifted his gaze, his eyes deep but cautious. "It's just a vision," he answered with a shy smile. A vision of what could be, not of what is. The billionaire, who had never cared much for art, found himself thoughtful. That response was far more philosophical than he expected from someone living on the streets. Not knowing exactly why, the billionaire pressed on. "I would love to see more. Where can I find more of these visions?" The artist hesitated, scanning the man in the suit. He knew that behind the apparent politeness, there was something else. "Right here. I paint wherever I can," he replied with a hint of irony. The billionaire, intrigued, fell silent for a moment. Something about this man, his art, his way of living, made the billionaire feel he was in the presence of something more precious than the gold he had hoarded. The billionaire then made an unusual proposal. "May I pay you to paint something for me? Something that captures that vision, that essence." The artist looked at him, puzzled. He had never imagined someone so distant from his reality would take interest in his art. And yet, there was something about the billionaire that intrigued him, something that drew him closer. "I'm not sure I'd even know how to paint something for you," the artist replied, now with a touch of curiosity in his eyes. "Don't worry about the payment," the billionaire insisted. "I just want to see what you can create." The artist thought for a moment. Something about this offer didn't feel like a simple transaction. There was sincerity in it, something that made him accept, even without fully understanding what it meant. "All right, I'll do it," he answered, unaware of what awaited him. In the days that followed, the billionaire and the artist began meeting more often. The billionaire, although still skeptical about the value of art, found himself increasingly drawn to the depth of their conversations and to the artist's unique perspective on life. He wanted to understand more, yet something inside him resisted. How could someone so immersed in the world of business and numbers truly grasp the beauty of a painting? The artist, on the other hand, was hesitant. The idea of painting for someone with so much power and money felt strange. He wasn't used to being paid for his art, and even more, he felt uneasy with the billionaire's ostentation. The streets were his world, where colors and shadows blended in a pure and unrestrained way. Painting for a man so distant from his reality seemed almost like a challenge, but he couldn't deny that he was intrigued. "You want to see what I'm capable of," said the artist, beginning to work on a blank canvas, without knowing exactly what to create. "But art cannot be controlled," he warned, casting a wary glance at the billionaire. The billionaire, however, simply nodded. "I understand," he replied. He was used to having everything under control, but something about the artist pushed him to let go of that need. Over time, the billionaire began to fall in love with the idea of painting. He started to believe that a work of art might be the key to something deeper within himself, something he hadn't known he was searching for. Yet there was still something unsettling, as if the art kept slipping out of his control. He tried to interfere, suggesting colors, shapes, directions for the piece, but the artist insisted on following his own vision. This created a growing tension between the two, but also a curious attraction. In their next meetings, the billionaire came more frequently to watch the painting take shape, but he resisted the urge to impose his ideas. He wanted to understand art the way the artist did. Each brushstroke seemed to challenge him to question what he really knew about life. He began to realize that it was not merely about buying a work of art, but about understanding what it represented, trying to see the world through the artist's eyes. By the end of the week, the painting was nearly finished. The billionaire sat silently before it, admiring the work. What had once seemed like nothing more than a canvas of colors and shapes now felt alive, something that touched him in an unexpected way. "I don't know what to do with this," the billionaire admitted, feeling lost in front of the artwork. The artist, with an enigmatic smile, replied, "You will find out." The billionaire and the artist were becoming more and more involved in each other's lives. Their visits grew frequent, but so did the tension. The billionaire, with his genuine intention to understand art and the deeper meaning behind the painting, kept trying in different ways to interfere in the artist's creative process. He suggested colors, themes, and even tried to direct the emotions he wanted to see expressed on the canvas. The artist, however, resisted firmly. For him, art was not something to be controlled or molded according to external expectations. He believed that each brushstroke had to be free, spontaneous, unrestrained. He began to realize that the billionaire did not yet fully understand this, and the resistance of his intentions began to echo in the arguments that arose between them. "You're trying to make art into something it is not," said the artist, his frustration growing. "You want it to fit your idea of success, but art does not submit to that. It is born of freedom, even chaos, of what cannot be controlled." The billionaire heard these words and felt touched, but also challenged. He was so used to controlling everything around him that he didn't know how to face the idea of letting art, and his life, follow such an unpredictable path. While the artist fought to preserve his creative independence, the billionaire was beginning to understand the value of spontaneity, of freedom of expression. Yet he still felt a constant urge to grasp everything, to see the end of the process immediately. The contrast between the billionaire's vision and the artist's became clearer with every meeting, creating a tension that was almost palpable. During one of these arguments, the frustrated billionaire decided to take a bold step. He suggested that the artist paint something representing the future he desired, a future where the billionaire had everything he had ever wanted, but now with a new perspective on what truly mattered. The artist, with a skeptical look, refused the idea, feeling that the billionaire's vision was still limited, still too materialistic. "You still think things can be controlled," the artist said calmly. "The future doesn't take shape like that, with money and power. It comes from a deeper place, from something that cannot be bought. The billionaire remained silent, reflecting on these words, feeling for the first time that his mind was opening. The painting was becoming more than a simple task. It was starting to be a reflection of his own life. The billionaire began stepping away from business meetings and social commitments, using his time instead to explore the city streets. He wanted to better understand what the artist had told him. He wanted to see with his own eyes the lives of those who truly had nothing, yet seemed to live with more freedom than he had ever experienced. He visited shelters, spoke with others in similar circumstances, and started to see the streets as a stage of stories, of lives and experiences he had never noticed before. As he immersed himself in this new world, the billionaire began questioning the values he had lived by until then. Money, which once seemed like the key to everything, now appeared to be only a tool, an illusion of control that had kept him away from the essence of simple and true things. He saw children playing with whatever they could find on the streets, not caring about the lack of resources. He saw elderly people sharing stories with genuine smiles, despite all they had endured. And finally, he saw the artist again, in his simplicity, painting a new canvas in some random corner of the city. It was there in the streets that the billionaire caught a glimpse of the true freedom the artist had always spoken of. He realized that real wealth was not in the numbers in his bank account, but in the ability to connect with others, to see the world through different eyes, without the barriers he had once built for himself. He spent hours wandering through the city, feeling a peace he had never experienced before. When he returned to the gallery where the artist was working, the billionaire sat in silence, unsure of how to express what he was feeling. The artist, noticing his silence, asked, "What are you thinking?" The billionaire looked at him and answered, with a sincerity he had never thought himself capable of, "I'm beginning to understand what you mean." The billionaire now found himself divided between two very different realities. On one hand, he felt a growing need to change, to distance himself from the world of business and ostentation. He was beginning to see life in a different way, simpler, more human. But on the other hand, his old life kept calling him back. His friends and business colleagues began to notice his absence and started questioning his decisions. To them, the billionaire's change was nothing but a passing phase, something he would soon overcome. "You can't just walk away from all of this," said one of his closest business partners during a lunch. "You have an empire to manage. Your family depends on it. Your image depends on it. You're abandoning what really matters just to lose yourself in a fantasy." The words, though harsh, echoed in the billionaire's mind. They were right in many ways. He had always been the central figure of that financial machine, and his power came from the control he held over his wealth and the business world. Yet, on the other hand, he felt life was asking something different of him, something deeper. The artist, with his worldview, challenged everything the billionaire had ever believed to be true. True freedom doesn't come from more money, the artist had once told him. It comes from understanding who you really are, beyond possessions and beyond the image you build. These thoughts reverberated in the billionaire's mind, creating an internal battle that left him feeling lost. He found himself in a moment of transition, consumed by doubt. What should he do? Continue with his life of luxury and financial success, or take the more risky, uncharted path that now seemed like the only one capable of offering him inner peace? He felt as though he were at a crossroads, the future uncertain, and the weight of his decisions pressing heavily upon him. In a moment of frustration, he retreated to his mansion, but instead of seeking refuge in its luxury, he stood gazing out the window, contemplating the city that had been the center of his life for so many years. Out there, life seemed vibrant, full of possibilities, but he also knew that the cost of following that path might be higher than he was willing to pay. After several days of reflection, the billionaire decided to return to the streets, to seek out the artist and understand his life more deeply. He needed to know what had led that man so talented to choose to live under such harsh conditions. He found him in a corner of the city, painting with paint-stained hands, as always. The artist welcomed him with a smile but soon realized the billionaire was not there just to talk about art. He sensed something more was going on. "You want to know how I ended up here?" the artist said bluntly, as if he had known the question before it was even asked. The billionaire nodded, and the artist began to tell his story. "I actually came from a wealthy family. I had everything a man could want: education, money, opportunities. But none of it ever filled me. One day, I realized that money and status meant nothing to me. I lost everything, until I reached a point where, to survive, I had to disconnect from the life I once knew. I went to the streets and never looked back." The billionaire was shocked. It wasn't merely the story of a lost artist, but of someone who, like him, once had everything, and yet chose to let it all go. The artist continued, his words carrying a tone of wisdom. "Sometimes, you have to lose everything to find who you truly are. What people see on the streets isn't a reflection of who we are, but of a choice I made. I don't live according to the expectations of others. I live according to the truth I found out here, far from everything superficial." These words touched the billionaire deeply, who began to understand something that had once seemed incomprehensible. "I've spent so much time building a life to please others," said the billionaire, his voice filled with regret. "And now you're telling me that by letting go of all that, we can find something more real." The artist smiled, as if he had always known this moment would come. "The truth is never found in places like your offices or your luxury towers. The truth lives in simplicity, in art, in a life lived without the pressure of what others expect from us." The billionaire, moved by the artist's words, felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. He now saw things in a completely different way. Perhaps it was time to step away from everything he had known. But fear still lingered. He knew this decision could completely change his life, but he also knew he could no longer keep living with the emptiness that had always haunted him. The billionaire was now determined to help the artist. He believed he could make a difference in his life. Give him shelter, a home, something that would take him off the streets and grant him a more comfortable existence. During one of his visits to the spot where the artist usually painted, the billionaire finally made his offer. "I want to help you. I can give you a house, money so you'll never have to worry about the streets again," he said, trying to sound convincing. The artist looked at him with a skeptical smile, but his eyes were serious. He knew the billionaire was trying to do good in his own way, but he could not accept the offer as it was. "You don't understand," the artist said firmly. "I don't need a house or money. What I need is freedom. And that, my friend, cannot be bought." The billionaire was surprised by the response. He had expected the artist to accept with gratitude, but instead he was rejected. "I don't want your charity," the artist went on. "I am free here on the streets with my art. What you offer isn't freedom, it's only a gilded prison." The billionaire, though touched by the words, felt a rising frustration. How could he understand so little about true freedom? In the days that followed, the billionaire reflected deeply on what the artist had said. He wanted to help, but the rejection made him realize that his help might not be what the artist truly needed. He tried to make other offers, but was rejected again, and instead of driving him away, the rejections made him begin to understand the complexity of the situation. The artist didn't want to be saved. He wanted to be recognized for his freedom and for the value of his art. Over time, the billionaire began to understand that he could not solve the artist's problems with money. At the same time, he felt an urge to do more, to help in a way that was genuine, one that respected the artist's way of life. He realized that by trying to control everything with his wealth, he was limiting his own vision of the world. True help was not in giving money or a house, but in respecting the freedom and the unique perspective of each person. The billionaire decided to take a radical step. He stepped away from his businesses, and for the first time, began to question the role that money truly played in his life. He started joining volunteer activities, helping people in shelters, organizing events for social causes, and really listening to people's stories. In doing so, he realized that human connections, kindness, and compassion were more valuable than any contract or investment. During his visits to the artist, he began listening more than speaking. The billionaire started to understand the beauty that existed in simplicity and in the sincerity of relationships. He no longer felt the need to save the world or control everything. Instead, he realized he could use his wealth in a way that truly had a positive impact on people's lives, without becoming an obstacle to them. Through these months of reflection and change, the billionaire not only altered his way of seeing the world, but also his very identity. He no longer saw himself as the owner of everything, but as part of something greater, a human being connected with the struggles and hopes of others. He began investing in social projects more directly, expecting nothing in return. He now understood that his true legacy would not be in his possessions, but in the way he used his wealth to promote genuine change. The artist, witnessing this transformation, began to respect the billionaire even more. They started to understand each other in ways that once seemed impossible. Together, they discussed how art could be a force for change in the world, and how true freedom lay in living without the chains of social expectations. The billionaire began supporting the artist in a more genuine way, not by imposing his ideas, but by offering space and opportunity for the artist to express himself as he chose. With this new approach, the billionaire and the artist began developing a project together. A community art gallery, where street artists could exhibit their works and have the chance to be recognized for who they were, without judgment. The billionaire felt he had finally found something that truly mattered. Not the building of a financial empire, but the building of something that united people through art and genuine expression. The billionaire and the artist had now entered a new stage in their lives. The billionaire had discovered something deeper than he had ever imagined, a genuine purpose of contributing to the world in a way that truly mattered. He had begun letting go of his financial empire, focusing on social causes, and growing closer to the artist, who helped him understand the true value of life and freedom. The community art gallery they had created together began to take shape. They organized exhibitions that attracted not only city residents, but also artists who had long lived on the margins of society. The billionaire, who once saw himself as distant from the people, now felt a profound connection with them. He helped fund the gallery and promote art, without seeking to control anything. At last, he understood that art and freedom cannot be bought, only lived. The artist, meanwhile, continued to paint spontaneously, with more freedom than ever. He had found a new sense of life, not living on the streets anymore, but still maintaining the creative independence he always valued. He felt recognized not for his works being sold at high prices, but for the impact his art had on people's lives. He and the billionaire became inseparable friends, always debating what art could represent and how it could be a tool to transform the world. One day, while contemplating one of their exhibitions, the billionaire said with a sincere smile, "I have finally found something that is truly worthwhile. It's not what I have in my bank account, but what I can give back to the world." True wealth lies in human connections, in the freedom to be who you are. The artist nodded, smiling. Yes, freedom is the greatest work of art we can ever create. The billionaire, now a lighter man, freed from the pressures of money and power, realized that his true transformation came not from control, but from letting go. He understood that his journey with the artist had changed him irreversibly, and that art had opened his heart in a way he never thought possible. The community art gallery grew, reaching more people each month. Artists from all corners of the city began to showcase their works, and many who had once been invisible finally received the recognition they deserved. The billionaire, now involved with other social initiatives, continued supporting the gallery, but without the need to be at the center of attention. He had become a symbol of a new kind of wealth, one measured by good deeds and the real changes it brought into people's lives. The artist, in turn, became a mentor to young people who, like him, had faced hardships. He shared with them the importance of freedom in both art and life, showing that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find the true meaning of existence. He still painted, but now his works carried an even deeper purpose: to teach, inspire, and connect. The friendship between the billionaire and the artist grew stronger over the years. Together, they continued promoting art as a form of transformation, not only aesthetic, but social. They knew that true wealth was not in accumulating material possessions, but in leaving behind a legacy of positive change for the world. And finally, the billionaire understood that throughout his entire life, he had been trying to fill a void that nothing could ever fill. But when he met the artist and began to see the world from a new perspective, he realized that the true meaning of life was, in fact, to give and to share the best of what one has: art, freedom, and genuine human connection. The city, now transformed by art and empathy, reminded both the billionaire and the artist every day that the true beauty of life lies not in what we own, but in how we touch people's hearts. This story reminds us that true wealth often lies not in what we accumulate, but in the impact we make on the lives of others. The billionaire, when crossing paths with the homeless artist, did not find the solution to his emptiness in more money, but in something far more powerful: the freedom of art and the beauty of human connection. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to discover what truly matters. And you? Have you ever asked yourself what might be missing in your life in order to find this true wealth? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share it with someone you believe could also be inspired. Like, comment, and share your thoughts about what true freedom means to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this one. The journey of transformation and discovery continues, and you won't want to miss what comes next. See you in the next video.